Today, people feel pressure to prove themselves on social media. You've seen it, sharing every win, accomplishment, and/or experience. I would argue that social media should not be used as an indicator or a judge of someone's success. It's too easily staged and manipulated. And quite frankly, the most successful people I know rarely feel the need to broadcast their achievements. In fact, when I look at who actually makes it in business long term, there's one quality that stands above all others. It's humility. In this episode, Pam and I explore why humility is the hidden key to high performance. You'll learn what true humility looks like in business and relationships, and why it actually has nothing to do with downplaying your talents at all. We'll break down the specific behaviors that set up humble high performers apart, and why all the success in the world doesn't entitle any of us any kind of special treatment as human beings. If you want to understand how humility can transform your relationships and results, not the fake kind we see on social media, but we're talking the real deal, this episode is for you. Note here, as you achieve wins and successes, you should start noticing a shift inside you. You get to this point in your career and journey where you don't feel the urge to have to share. It actually feels good to keep the knowledge and the experience within you. You start feeling that intrinsic reward. Let's jump in. Out of curiosity, and I see it all the time too, but I'm just interested, Pam, what made you want to talk about humility? What was on your mind?
So, from time to time, Dan, for whatever reason, there are certain maybe situations that play out that have me thinking, probably time to refresh everybody on what humility is and the importance of it. And I don't know, Dan, if it's seasonal based on, some of our clients experiencing end of year. I don't know if it's all of a sudden when people go on what they would call a streak of success and it goes to their head. But from time to time throughout the year, I notice when there's a lot of situations like that. And it's always just, I think, a good reminder.
I think that's a key thing. When somebody starts to make a lot of money, I've noticed it, they start to lose their humility. However they've made the money, however the money came to them, it doesn't matter. They start to lose their sense of gratefulness, humility, where they came from, just being a person. And as you know, Pam, we have a lot of clients who work very, very hard. I mean, I've seen it. I mean, so many of our clients work their butt off and they're so focused and dedicated to what they do, and they make a lot of sacrifices. But then once that money starts pouring in, and you and I both work with people who make well into seven figures. But once that money starts pouring in, it's like something, like I don't know what happens, but the volume gets turned down on on humility.
Agreed. So, for those of you that know me, I'm a big Psychology Today fan. That's a great publication, and they cover so many things related to psychology and the topics that we talk about on our podcast. So, I did a deep dive on several articles within Psychology Today regarding humility. So, Dan, I'm going to walk you through these, and then maybe you can tell me kind of what sticks with you, how you feel you do at these different things, and maybe what some of our listeners can do to practice becoming more humble. And there's two interesting things. So there's the traits that characterize your ability to become more humble, but then there's a piece that talks about what it means to be humble at your core. And I'll get to that too, because I thought that was super interesting. So first of all, okay, humble people, they have a very accurate view of themselves. They acknowledge their mistakes and limitations. They are open to other people's viewpoints. I really like this one, and Psychology Today talks about the importance of this one. They can acknowledge the strengths of others. And here's the other one they say is really important in striving to be humble. To your point, Dan, they keep their accomplishments and abilities in perspective. They have a very low self-focus, and they appreciate the value, gratitude, of all things, including people. They don't see people as more valuable than somebody else. Everybody has a level of value. They don't value people at different levels, which I found interesting. So when you hear that list, Dan, I want to hear your perspective on this. Which ones do you think probably come a bit more natural to our listening audience? But what are the ones that you think, you know what? I guarantee you a lot of us don't think about it and don't practice those particular characteristics when developing humility.
Yeah, when you were going through the list, I was doing some self-reflection. I was. I should have wrote them all down. I did not.
That's okay. That's okay.
I just came back from a workshop where we did a lot of role play and feedback as a group to each individual. What I've noticed is it seems like for many, self-criticism is easier than external criticism. So I've seen a lot of people who can be really hard on themselves, which is fine, right? Where they're like, yeah, I need to get better at this. I need to get better at that. I didn't do this well. This didn't feel comfortable. And there's some really good honesty there. But yet there's a struggle to take the feedback externally from someone else. I did think about that when you were making that list.
That's a big one in strengthening your humility, being okay accepting feedback from others.
What's also funny is I've noticed, just because we've been doing this for so long, you know, like Pam, what we do for some of our clients is we literally help our clients figure out who do we think is going to make it and who do we think is going to struggle, as you know. And it's not that we're labeling them good or bad. We're just saying this person seems to have the behaviors, the attitude, and the work ethic that there's a good chance they're going to make it. And this person's missing either A, B, or C. And usually what I've noticed is missing is if they can't take feedback, I've noticed very rarely do they make it. It's like a one-to-one correlation, if I could say that. So like if I have to give somebody feedback and they want to not argue the feedback, they don't necessarily do that. But what I've noticed is a lot of folks will say or give a reason why. Well, it's role play. I don't do so well at role play. Or, you know, I got this on my mind and this is bothering me today. Or there's always a reason why something's not right. So what happens is they don't take the feedback. And the correlation is very strong that they struggle. They don't make it. More importantly, they don't reach their goals, I've noticed. Let's take the whole making it in the career or making it at a company out of it. What I've noticed is they don't even hit their own goals. They don't.
That absolutely, I think, plays into a lot of what I researched and dug into over the past 2 weeks. So there's two that really stood out to me. And it's funny, one of my clients actually brought this to my attention. He said, you know, Pam, I understand that not a lot of us anymore, we're at least self-aware not to speak negatively about our competition. He said, so I don't think I have a single sales professional that ever would speak negatively about the competition. But then here's what he said to me. He said, but Pam, in my opinion, if they can't acknowledge the strengths of their competition, it's no different than speaking negatively about them. And it's funny, Dan, this research that I did on humility says exactly that. You say, well, I'm not speaking negatively about them, so that's good enough, versus no, I can acknowledge that my competitors are very good at certain things. They're very good at certain things. And his words were, that's no different. If you can't acknowledge the strengths of your competitors, it's no different than speaking negatively. And he said, I'm afraid it's starting to show up in lack of humility in my team. And I'm like, wow. So I really, really liked that. And then the other one that struck me was keeping accomplishments and abilities in perspective, understanding what piece that plays in our overall humility. That to me, I thought was interesting too.
You know, Pam, when you were going through that list, I felt like there were some things as I self-reflected that I'm like, okay, I do that. Like accomplishments. I don't talk about accomplishments. In fact, I've even gone to my coach recently and said, I don't think I've accomplished anything. I did. And you know, you and I are wired the same where we don't talk about that stuff. We don't, but then at the same time, I'm also very critical of myself. But there's certain feedback I know I'm touchy on. Like my daughter gave me feedback this weekend. I listened and I know what it was and I would agree with her, but it was a little hard to hear.
But that's okay, right? That's okay.
It was, but it was fair. It was very fair. And yeah, so like, can it be possible that some of the stuff you're good at and some of it you're not?
Absolutely. It says that.
Okay.
It says
Because
that.
I was going to say, when you were talking about that list, I was self-analyzing myself and I'm like, oh my God, I do this, and this, but I don't do that, and that.
Well, and you know, Dr. Potterat, he talks a lot about humility is needed if you're going to be highly successful. He says it's one of the top characteristics of highly successful people is a level of humility. And, according to Dr. Potterat and some of these articles in Psychology Today, you can strengthen your humility, but you do have to understand the depth and breadth of what it means to be humble. You can't just say, well, I'm a good listener and I have low self-focus, so I guarantee you I'm a humble person. It's, it says you've got to understand the broader picture of what it means to be humble and continue to work on all these different areas, not just focus on the ones that are easy for you. Focus on the ones that aren't.
Doc's the one I talked to it about.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, Doc, I got to talk to you about something. I go, so it's funny, but hey, real brief. I don't want to interrupt, but can you give the list again to me and our listeners? Just go through it real quick.
Absolutely. So humble people have an accurate view of themselves. They acknowledge their mistakes and limitations before others do. They are open to others' viewpoints. They can acknowledge the strengths of other people. They keep their accomplishments and abilities in perspective. They have a low self-focus, and they appreciate the value of all things, including people. And they don't see certain people as more valuable than others. The one thing that I was going to tell you then that it goes into is at this core. So at the core, and I thought this was so interesting, Dan, and I know you will appreciate this. Outside of those domains and the traits of being humble and learning how to become more humble, it says humility is characterized by the belief that no matter how great my accomplishments are, they do not entitle me to special treatment as a person. So like it says, even the most humble of people want to be promoted or acknowledged for their work, but it stops there. So they don't say, okay, because I'm now the president of this organization, it means I'm treated differently as a person because of that, outside the domains of that job. And that's what I found very, very interesting, because you and I both know people that they believe their level of success entitles them to things as a human being. And I love that it talked about at its core, people believe no matter how great their accomplishments are, it doesn't entitle them to special treatment as a person. Yes, the best of athletes deserve more playing time, but it doesn't mean they should get better service than somebody else in a restaurant. So like things like, I thought that was such an interesting way to explain at the core what humility is. And because I've achieved a certain title in my life or whatever it is, that bleeds out into I deserve special treatment as a person. So I thought that was very interesting too. And I guarantee you, some of our listeners are gut checking themselves right now. We absolutely probably think, it does entitle to me to special treatment as a person because I've achieved this level of success over here. And it says true humility at its core says, no, why would I think that? Why would I think that? So I liked that.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
And so if you think about it that way, like allow my accomplishments and my success to live where those accomplishments and success are. And again, it uses a sports analogy, which I really like. Absolutely, I deserve more playing time. Absolutely, I do. But that doesn't translate once I leave the domain of sports. It doesn't translate that I should get special treatment outside of that. I really like that. So, and I thought this was good too, because I found this really good comparison, humility on the spectrum and ego on the spectrum. So, humility is here and then ego is up here. And I liked this definition. Humility is the quality of being modest and not thinking of oneself as superior to others, while ego refers to a person's sense of self-importance, often characterized by arrogance and an inflated belief in one's own ability. So it talks about you're on the spectrum, and you have to understand on the spectrum from humility to ego where you are. And then, Dan, to your point, it helps you pinpoint more where I've got to practice my ability to become more humble.
What's strange is, or maybe not, is that latter part where they have a highly inflated view of self. Those folks don't make it.
No, I agree. And it's funny, the ones that don't are the ones that flourish. I mean, I can think on the top of my head right now, some very specific clients who don't have egos, and they're more successful than anybody in their respective domains. It's amazing how it truly translates.
So how would someone strengthen, right? Obviously, this is very incremental, right? We're talking, you can't measure over a period of time. It's got to be a continuous investment. But how could someone strengthen one of these areas?
Well, we talk about a lot of them on our platform. We talk about the importance of receiving feedback, constructive criticism, and not getting defensive around it. We talk about the importance of listening and understanding somebody else's perspective, not listening to try to prove them wrong, but listening so you can learn something from it. I will tell you, Dan, that's probably been the most important for me. And I can always tell when Jeff is asking me questions so he can try to prove me wrong versus asking me questions so he can really learn from how I think about things.
How does that go? How does that work for Jeff?
Well, it's funny too, because I'm like, I used to do what he's doing to me right now all the time. And that's an ego thing. It's an ego thing. So I think that's a big one. Low self-focus. I think that's one where, the article gives some examples of when people are talking about themselves all the time. And, for a lack of example, like if I came on here and told you, well, here's how busy I am today, and here's all the things I have going on. And it's like, okay, like it talked about, you understand that other people also have really busy schedules and a lot going on. And so the low self-focus, I think, is one that probably everybody could practice.
As you've been talking, especially for the past 10 minutes, right? I've been thinking that's why I hate social media. I absolutely loathe social media. I have a Facebook account. I haven't been on it in years. I have to be on LinkedIn to a degree, but my posts are always about advice, business, or lessons. But I hate social media because social media at its core is the me-centric platform. Hey, look at me. Yeah. Here's what I want you to think I am. Here's what I want you to believe I am. And over the years, right, how many times have we read something from someone or seen a video from someone? It's just so promoting, bragging.
A humble brag. So a couple of the articles call out the humble brag is not humble. You know, my father used to say it all the time. If you feel the need to tell people how you're helping others, like, volunteering or donating money, he's like, that's not humble. Don't ever do that. You don't need to tell people that you're helping people and volunteering. You don't need to tell people that you've donated money to this organization.
Pam, you just hit one right. I'm on the board for Champ Camp, which is we help kids with significant physical and mental disabilities, okay? And it's just one camp a year where they get to be outside enjoying things, but it takes a whole mess of doctors and nurses, and it's for 1 week, and it's just an amazing organization. I have this one picture of one of them and me, and he's a little guy. His name's TJ, and it was awesome. We were at the main dinner, whatever we call it sneaker ball. It was in September. I've been meaning to post on it, just to post and bring attention to it, but I've struggled with the post because it's like I don't do Champ Camp to impress others. I've been involved for 3 years. I've never said a word, mentioned a word, posted once on it because I don't care. I don't care if other people like it, don't like it, agree, disagree. I really don't. But to your point, you're right. It's doing things because you want to do them, because it means something to you. But the problem is that seems so far and few between now. Everybody wants to put like a big ribbon and a bow on what they do and say, hey, look how great I am. And then here's the other thing that drives me nuts is how LinkedIn has become this world of selfies now. Look, I'm just going to say, if you don't have anything to post that can help or contribute towards someone else's experience or whatever, don't post about yourself. I don't know. Maybe I'm just old fashioned on that, but it just drives me nuts.
Well, and if you start kind of digging into this, and I guarantee you there's plenty of marketing firms out there that would probably say you and I are wrong because self-promoting and developing a brand is super important in business. But I do think, Dan, I think there is a fine line that you have to understand when it is a lack of humility and it's your ego versus, all right, is this really my brand? And to your point, my business strengths, or is this me wanting everybody to know? So it's tough because we are in this world of self-promotion and, you've got to develop your brand and
It is because as you know, we have a partner that we use and they're telling me to post stuff all the time about A, B, and C. And I won't, but they keep telling me you should. It's part of your life. People want to know about your life. And when they say that, I think, who the hell wants to know about my life? Everybody's got their own life to deal with. What the hell would they care about what Dan Lappin's doing? Nor should they. And they're like, no, you can't think that way. I go, why can't I think that way? I mean, Pam, you're right. It's
hard.
Yeah.
But I do think it's played into why we see so many assessments as of late where humility is one of the lowest scores in a bad way, not a good way. Like way too much ego and not enough humility present.
Well, I think for our listeners is this. Let's be clear. It's a balance. Look, having a little bit of and I don't know if I'm saying this right, so Pam, excuse me if I'm not. Having a little edge or a little ego that you can manage may not be always a bad thing.
No, I agree.
Sometimes not being perfect is okay as well. So like even at the beginning when you went through your list, my self-critical side of me was going through that list going, okay, I do that. Oh, I don't do that. I don't do that, right? I was like, I need to get better at that. But for our listeners, I think just think about these things that Pam shared. Can you share them one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. An accurate view of themselves. They acknowledge mistakes and limitations. They are open to others' viewpoints. They can acknowledge the strengths of others. They keep their accomplishments and abilities in perspective. They have a low self-focus. They appreciate the value of all things, including people, and they don't value people more than somebody else. Okay, there's people are valued on a level spectrum, and it's characterized by the belief that no matter how great your accomplishments are, they do not entitle you to special treatment as a person. And then the last piece of this, it talks about why humility is so important as a human being. And it talks about your ability to become more ethical and effective in your leadership. Your levels of arrogance start to disappear. You build stronger relationships with others. And this is the one I thought was interesting too. You have a more positive reputation in the eyes of others because the article states it's easier to notice humble people. And so people gravitate to folks that are less humble. And by happenstance, you start to develop a stronger, more positive reputation. Because for whatever reason, our radars can pick up on people who are more humble than others. And they tend to have stronger reputations.
So what you're saying is the more humble, the more people would be attracted to spending time with you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Which I thought was really interesting. And again, to your point, Dan, there is a fine line. And I think with ourselves and in the midst of others, we owe it to people to maybe point out, I want you to tell me when I'm starting to lack some humility, and I want to be able to tell you when I'm seeing examples of, do we need a gut check in humility? Like, I just think in what we all do, especially those of us that are client facing and business development, it's just a really important conversation to be able to have if we see people's humility getting a little out of whack.
All right. Just to help our audience out, what's the one that you want to work on?
So the one I think I want to work on, continue to work on, I want to understand others' perceptions so I can learn from it. I am a classic example of I am asking you questions so I can tell you why your point of view is wrong. I want to get better at that. And the low self-focus. Dan, you and I, we manage crazy schedules. And I think that sometimes can contribute to it's all about me. It's all about me.
Yeah, that's mine. I mean, and you know me well. I want to create for my family and for my friends and for those that are around me. That's like my big thing in life, right? Create experiences. However, I know because of that, I have to be careful of my self-focus. I do. Like, my self-focus, unfortunately, starts at 5 a.m. and it goes until sometimes 6, 7 at night. And I may tell myself, and there might be some truth in this, where it's about, hey, what am I doing? What am I creating? What am I giving to others? And there's some truth in that. But I also got to be careful that I think I do tend to make it too much about me sometimes on a daily basis.
And I don't want to put that on others.
Yeah, and that probably affects my family more than anything else, but that's the most important part of me. So I definitely want to continue to try to work on the self-focus and make sure it's a healthy balance or it's a healthy level.
Agreed.
I do know the two that I have worked on significantly hard. One is judging. So I work heavily on not judging what people say, and then I try to seek to understand their perspective. Whether I agree or disagree is irrelevant. That's something I work on very much so all the time. So if someone says something and it kind of rubs me or offends me, instead of getting pulled into that or sucked down by it, I just try to seek to understand why they feel that way, or what's their thought, what was their experience, what's the perception, whatever it might be. And then the other one is probably like a year or two ago, more like 2, I used to judge a lot of our competition, but I try not to as much anymore at all, because I try to say, okay, they're good at something. What are they good at? Is that something I could learn from them? Is that something? And that's not always easy, but I got to work on that one too.
No, I agree. Well, I try to do that one too, as you know, quite a bit.
But no, I mean, the point is there's always work to be done.
Always work to be done.
And I always feel really good when I put the work in. It's just reminding myself, hey, you gotta keep working at this. I don't know if you're the same, where it's just like, right, it's a constant reminder. You're like, okay, I gotta keep working at this. I gotta keep working at this.
Always. And just gut check. Again, that gut check of maybe when have things gotten maybe a little bit out of perspective, or am I blowing things out of proportion, or am I letting certain things get to my head that I shouldn't be letting them get to my head? That's for what I'm observing right now. And I think it's just important that we are able to have these conversations with each other.
Yeah. Great topic, Pam. Really good. I mean,
good. I love it.
I hope it got, I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. I hope it got or encouraged our listeners to listen and reflect as much as it got me reflecting today.
Awesome.
Yeah. As we wrap up this episode on this very powerful and important topic of humility, there's two things I want you to be thinking about. Number one, how do you respond when faced with tough feedback? Do you rush to defend yourself in your decision making? Or do you sit back, listen, and try to understand and debate, at least effectively and objectively, what's being shared? It's our reaction in those moments where we can see our level of humility displayed. That's where we prove whether we're truly open to learning and growing or just pretending. When you experience your next win, which type of fulfillment and reward do you crave? Do you seek the external satisfaction or the internal sense of fulfillment? Does your head go straight to a panicked or a frantic, I need to post this? Or do you feel a sense of calm enrichment? Your ability to stay humble directly impacts your ability to keep learning, growing, and building meaningful relationships and great results. The more successful you become, the more important the work itself becomes. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow us on your preferred streaming platform. And if you choose, leave a review. You have many options to listen to. We appreciate the time that you spend with us, and we would value your feedback on Apple Podcasts.